Before I get into this review, there's one thing I need to say first. Actually, two, since I hope, emphasis on hope, to have this out before Trans Day of Visibility, aka TDOV, so let's get that one out of the way first. If you are seeing this on or before TDOV, Is It Wrong to Fall in Love with a Reclusive Wizard in a Sky Palace by Autumn Wolff is available in the TDOV Itch Bundle, organized by B, aka Maria Ying. $15 for 15 ebooks and 1 audiobook, mostly written by trans women, and including the critically acclaimed A Rotten Girl by Gemma Topaz and Alison Greaves's Kimmy. Mega content warning on that one, by the way, just in case. If you are seeing this after TDOV, 2026 that is, then that bundle has ended, but Autumn does also maintain a semi-permanent bundle herself, which contains all of her books, to support her Trans Meal Fund mutual aid program, so go check that out if this sounds appealing and you want literally everything an amazing writer has ever written. As for point 2, I recommend this book. It's fun, it's sweet, it's trans, it's lesbian, it plays with themes of self-hatred and atonement. Once the romance hits its stride, it's up there for one of Autumn's best, the sex is hot, and Wolfie's comedy chops are in full force, with the timing of a bemusingly drunk Swiss watchmaker. I'm saying this because I have critiques. That's the difference between being a critic and being a fan, or a reader, or consumer. I am, in this instance, a critic, here to give my own opinions on creative work based on my own criteria, context, and experiences. A fan is anyone who's ride or die for the creator, the genre, whatever. They're here for it 1200%, whereas a reader, or potential reader, is everyone else, and those are the people who I'm specifically going to be addressing. If you want to know if I recommend Is It Wrong to Fall in Love with a Reclusive Wizard in a Sky Palace by Autumn Wolff, yes, I do. However, because I am currently occupying the role of a critic, I want to discuss what I feel were missteps, including on my part. Sometimes, I think I read Autumn's books wrong. See, I tend to read them once they're done. I'm the kind of girl who likes to sit down with a novel and tear through it in a sitting or two. But many of Autumn's books were initially released as serials on Scribblehub or her Patreon. I want to get one thing straight out of the gate. Serialization does not connote quality, good or bad, but it does affect how the work is delivered. The medium is the message and all that jazz. Think about the difference between binge watching a show and watching one episode a week as it airs. I honestly think Autumn's serialized work is better as such because it forces you to sit with the status quo at the end of each chapter for a while, even if it's just a couple of days until the next chapter is released. An engaged reader will be talking about the last chapter in the comments or Discord or just with friends, or even just thinking about what the characters might be doing during the moments we don't see. But if you tear through all of Is It Wrong to Fall in Love with a Reclusive Wizard in a Sky Palace into sittings like I did, it can feel rushed in places. That's what I mean about I think I read them wrong. I quite enjoy Autumn's writing, but if I was more intentional about setting them down every few chapters, I actually think I'd like them even more. Well, with that out of the way, how about I actually review the book now? Autumn Wolff's latest novel returns to Favara, the same world as her isekai romance from last year. The postman becomes a bunny goddess in another world, my second favorite of Autumn's books. Or it was until I started reading They Call Me an Angel while writing this review, my new favorite work by the Maynor Wolff. This Favaran outing follows Darsha the Flower Bard and Snarl the Wyvern Wizard in a story pretty openly inspired by Howl's Moving Castle. At times I sort of question wearing the inspiration quite so openly, as it encourages drawing comparisons, but kennel me if Autumn doesn't get away with it. Again, the start is a bit, I need a term for this, whiplashy for my taste. It feels both too fast and too slow in ways I suspect reading it as a serial would have alleviated. See, I went on that tangent for a reason. Darsha is quickly established as the sort of hyper-competent, self-assured, don't need no man, woman, home, or magic dyke you just know deep down is really a scared kid under layers and layers of armor, until she's cursed by the Bone Witch, a dude best described as somehow an even more toxic Harrowhark nonagesmus if she was a demonically cursed D-boy. The trans part is my headcanon, to be clear, but I stand by it and have at least 2 in-text reasons to back up that interpretation. The curse causes her to float up, up, and away until she's either asphyxiated, or the curse rescinds its moratorium on gravity enforcement, reintroducing Darsha and Farvara through the medium of terminal velocity. Assuming she hadn't bumped into the fortuitously floating island and the domicile of grouchy cloud spirit Cloa, a young wyvern Spindle, and the titular reclusive wizard Snarl. Thus is our stage set. Darsha wants her curse removed so she can return to her wandering bardic ways without randomly launching into the sky anymore. Snarl wants this girl off her island because she's exiled herself up here for some reason and doesn't think she deserves other people, but she also can't just let the woman float away, so she's offered to try and break the curse. Both are trying to find Cloa's oath, the magic binding her to the Sky Island, for which she's also promised to break Darsha's curse. And Spindle gets someone else to color with. And here's the thing. I like Cloa. I like Darsha. I like to hate the Bone Witch. But I love Snarl. And a lot of why is Autumn seems to love her a bit inequitably as well. While we're rapidly introduced to Darsha, her damage, and the way she's been unhealthily coping, Snarl gets a more slow burn build of intrigue. I'd say maybe a bit too slow to start, but it finds its groove soon enough. We can see her maladaptive coping right out the gate. But the how and why Snarl lives in this self-imposed exile above the clouds Darsha has so intruded upon is picked and teased out as the two grow closer. Which for me makes Snarl's narrative much more interesting than Darsha's. I don't think it stems from the Howl's inspiration because I'm just going to say Snarl is more of a character than Howl ever was. In the movie, I'm sorry, I am not going to hunt down a 212-page children's book from 1986 for a book review unless Autumn herself specifically demands that I do. This is why I can't be trusted. Just in case. Autumn was inspired by the novel Howl's Moving Castle as well. I ran off to go check a plot summary and the Wikipedia page, only to now have to add this whole section. All because I learned Dianne Wynne Jones specifically modeled Howl on the Byronic hero archetype, essentially the literary word for when a protagonist is the kind of person the audience would call a crazy, vengeful bitch were they a woman, but we like it because they're a dude. Or because we're trans girls who can identify their archetype as an egg struggling with internalized masculine societal expectations. Thus explaining why Howl always seemed like such a fluffing egg. And requiring that I also give Autumn further credit, as Snarl is a searing indictment of the Byronic archetype and its oft tacit defense of the harm masculinity's harsh societal standards inflict, and cause others to inflict, upon us when we fail to meet them. Also, the similarities between the novel version of The Witch of the Wast's plan to create a Renaissance-era misunderstanding of our rebis, recently further perpetuated by Castlevania, and Autumn's Invictus side plot, makes me think she actually was inspired by the novel, too. Okay, I'm doing a Cliff's Notes version of this, and then I will also probably put out a more complete version for patrons over on Patreon Coffee. Sorry, but this, not a rebus. Like, this is Frankenstein's monster, which itself was based on the idea of a homunculus, an artificial person, which was not a thing from the original alchemists, but the weirdos from post-Dark Ages and, like, the Renaissance kind of misunderstanding stuff from the Hermetics from, like, 300 it's either CE or BCE, I don't remember which off the top of my head, who have nothing to do with these guys, the cult that are kind of recent. They are completely unrelated. Also, similar, since I'm talking about Castlevania for a second, this is not the symbol for hell. This is the symbol for black sulfur, which those same Renaissance weirdos went, oh, I think this is a sulfur, brimstone, hell. The Hermetics didn't have really like an idea of hell. It wasn't a thing for them. So alchemists, this symbol was black sulfur, a kind of black dye made from sulfur. It was really important and cool because it was a black dye, and black dyes are kind of a hard thing to do until relatively modern times. But yeah, that was all that. A rebis is actually this thing, which itself, again, is another weird visual misunderstanding of the metaphor of the alchemical idea of the magnum opus, the philosopher's stone, the great work. All of them are metaphors for attaining enlightenment. The reason why the whole male-female thing is there, especially on the rebis, the Castlevania one has a weird fixation on, yes, they're also hermaphroditic, but I mean, so did the Renaissance people too. It has nothing to do with genitals or anything like that. It's that the alchemists saw all things as gendered, where the more physical things were generally like more masculine, and things that were more spiritual, intelligence, emotions, that deal, were feminine, and that to attain enlightenment, one had to embody both of them, not like physically by having the right bits, no, but by actually like embodying the idea of all things masculine and the all things feminine at the same time. It's just a bad visual metaphor by people who didn't understand what the original metaphor was, because it had been more than a millennia since the original things were written, and they were sort of written in code because alchemists used the same terms and language for the proto-science of alchemy and the proto-science of astrology, which again has very little to do with like horoscopes. It's just that Renaissance people took them in weird directions, and then the rest of us here in the modern era also took them in even weirder directions. But it was, they used the same words that they originally were using for their proto-sciences, and also used it in their philosophical and spiritual discussions. That's why it's all fucky. Tangent and sidebar to that tangent done. I return you to the normal review. I'm not sorry. While writing this script, I think I finally hit on what about this book has been rubbing me ever so slightly wrong. It felt like the lion's share of Snarl and Darsha's growth happens when they're separate. It feels out of sync for a romance and the themes Wolffie is otherwise playing with here. I think it's also why the first 7 or so chapters feel a little oddly paced to me, sort of sectioned off from each other, like this one is mostly plot establishing, this one is mostly romance, this one's mostly developing intrigue. I think chapter 8 is where it really starts to find its groove and come together for me. If I had to complain about anything, narratively speaking at least, it's the Bone Witch. I love little demonic T-boy Nona Jesmus, but the character we see in chapter 1 doesn't feel like the same one we see in the final chapter, and it's not because he's changed in the narrative. See, chapter 1 Bone Witch is a dick who curses Darsha for... Okay, he gives a reason, but since we don't really know anything about him, it kind of sounds like bullshit, and after the book, it doesn't really make sense with what we now know his motivation is. Chapter 19, Bone Witch, well, we've seen all of Snarl's memories of the series of unforgivable things she did with her squad leader, Ulquist, who is so obviously the Bone Witch, Wolff doesn't even bother pretending it's supposed to be a twist, which makes it really strange when Snarl and Darsha only put together that they're the same person in the last chapter upon seeing him together. I guess they both assumed Ulquist was dead, and there was just another bone mage roving the UC countryside? It even kind of makes sense after I double-checked. Most of the flashbacks were Snarl's dreams. The only one she actually recounts directly to Darsha barely mentions Ulquist and is primarily about more traumatic topics. So good continuity, just sort of odd for the reader when something we've been treating as a known quantity is a surprise to the characters. Which also comes back to my point about each character's growth feeling sort of sequestered, separated. But to wheel back to my previous point, after finishing the book, I get why the Bone Witch is there in Chapter 19. I get what he's doing and why. His motivation makes a kind of sense, as does the reason he ended up being kind of a nothing burger of an antagonist. But I have no idea why he cursed Darsha and started the plot off in Chapter 1. When Is It Wrong to Fall in Love with a Reclusive Wizard in a Sky Palace is hitting, it is hitting. Which unfortunately spotlights the moments where it's merely good, and it's even rarer, missteps all the more. Oh, and I'm docking points from my reviews, which I refuse to score, for the sex. It's great! But then I always leave Autumn Wolff's books wanting more. Let's be honest, that would be the case even if she put out a pure erotica novel. Girl writes damn good sex. No, I'm taking utterly fake points off my fuck you, you can't put a numerical value on an opinion review score because Wolff managed to include erogenous horns, this phrase, which is now marked indelibly onto my soul right next to the mark that already said, fuck I want horns, and a shape-shifting wyvern wizard, but she didn't give us the scene where Darsha fucks a wyvernified Snarl into a puddle, especially since Darsha and Snarl manage the oft hard to convey well bottomy dom subby top dynamic. Nope. I can't actually leave on that note, much as I'd like to. Is It Wrong to Fall in Love with a Reclusive Wizard in a Sky Palace by Autumn Wolff is for sale on itch, bookshop.org, Amazon, all the good places. I would throw links into the description, but YouTube is now suppressing those, or videos that have too many links in their description, so it might be a comment, or I might link them in a Google Doc that I will include a link to just that. Sorry, we live in hell. I will also be including Autumn's Patreon and Scribble Hub, where she is currently posting chapters to her post-apocalyptic lit RPG, They Call Me an Angel. I also had to add this bit later too. The 8 public chapters of which I read while writing and recording this, and I am not going to be normal about this. Go read They Call Me an Angel. If the phrase lit RPG makes you think of the works of Matt Dinneman, Aileron Kong, or Dakota Kraut, this is not that. It's closer to fake video games, a medium which needs better nomenclature. Think Titanium Daydreams if it was inspired by Devil May Cry, or Moxel if it was early 2000s edgy written by a trans woman rather than pitch dark fantasy, or maybe Mogworld sans metabits. Wolff perfectly captures the energy of playing a game, rather than having game mechanics forcibly applied to the protagonist, or not forcibly, just you know what I mean. The point of it is not protagonist dealing with game mechanics so much as the reader is conceptualized as the player in a really clever and unique way. As always, thank you so very much for watching and enjoying my work as well as Autumn's. You know the drill. Please like, comment, subscribe, dingle the bingle so YouTube actually tells you when I post things. All that jazz. And you can find my website, Blue Sky, Discord, other assorted links, all down in the description. Everything I do, written, streamed, whatever, is brought to you by folks just like you, thanks to their support over on my Patreon. That's patreon.com/Fen, and coffee.com. That's that stupid spelling of coffee, /Fen. For as little as $1 a month. So I'd like to offer a special thank you to April, Fragile Paper, Manfred, Pinball Witch, Pimento, Robin Autumn Marsh, Rose, Writer Princess, and Yalk. Thank you all so very much. I could not do this without all of you.